Let's continue our discussion of Full Metal Jacket, part one of the film. So in this lecture, we're going to talk a little bit more about how the men are transformed from, regular civilians into militarized soldiers, and how we could see this as a kind of process of dehumanizing the men. We'll also talk a little bit more about how Private Pyle, or otherwise known as Leonard Lawrence, fails to kind of measure up in regards to his um, sort of gender identity, his masculinity, when compared with the other men. And we'll also hopefully get to the part where Private Joker, earns Hartman's respect by sort of standing up for his own beliefs. Okay, so let's continue our discussion of part one of Full Metal Jacket. So just starting from the opening monologue where Sergeant Hartman is uh, sort of going on a diatribe about how the men are failing to measure up. He sort of renames each man, stripping them of their identity and then renaming them. So he takes away their individuality by taking away their civilian name and then renaming them something according to his own sort of definitions, what their identity is. He also kind of uses a lot of derogatory language. He talks to the men as if they are kind of subhuman, that they're not even men. So he calls them maggots, pukes, ladies, a lot of slurs like homophobic slurs, derogatory or sort of misogynist language. Uses racial slurs as well. But at the same time, he sort of views each man as equally worthless. So to him, they're all sort of on the same footing at this time in the narrative. They have yet to sort of prove themselves as men and prove themselves as Marines. And it becomes apparent that a large part of their identity as Marines is tied to this idea of a violent form of masculinity that's kind of personified or embodied in the rifle. And there's this idea that Marines are supposed to become, or a good Marine is really a killing machine. And that's what these young men are being turned or transformed into through this basic training, is how to take away their, compassion, their empathy for others, and turn them into cold, ruthless killing machines. So this is part of, Kubrick's kind of underlying satire or critique of the military system. So these aren't, they're not learning to be guardians for people who are vulnerable or weak. They're not learning how to even, protect others. They're learning to kill. And that's sort of the sole purpose for a Marine in this system. And that line, the sort of identity is related to a kind of violence, is symbolically related to the importance of the rifle in terms of their sense of self. And there's that line in the film where he has the men recite kind of a prayer to their rifle. They're supposed to name their rifle. Has to have a girl's name as well. So that could be something related to the objectification of women or the viewing of women as a kind of possession, and the men as a kind of having to master their weapon. So they become masters of violence. And we also get that interesting scene where the men's sort of identity as men is also related to their possession of a weapon. So the rifle, gun, penis symbol, kind of that equivocation or that equation of that a gun is like your male genitalia is kind of connoted in that one scene where they're all marching and grabbing their groins. Um, we have a sort of, an association where it's a very sort of violent form of masculinity that's being taught to these young men. And they are sort of learning that their masculinity or sexual identity is sort of also tied to their violence and dominance and aggression. So that's sort of what that scene kind of shows us. And then they learn that, without their rifle, they become useless. So this is another sort of important message of how important it is that they master their weapon, and they themselves become weapons. They become a tool or a killing machine themselves. So it's kind of a process of dehumanizing these men, turning them into objects of war, the tools through which the war machine perpetuates itself. So as it becomes evident, each individual man might not survive the war experience, but it's the perpetuation of that system, the Marine Corps, that will carry on or continue. So they sort of see the individual men as less important than just maintaining the system. So the Marine Corps will always exist, even if the individuals themselves die. So it's sort of a killing, death of the individual, and the dehumanizing of men into these killing machines. So that's the process of part one. So we get sort of repeated scenes where one man, Private Pyle, otherwise known as Leonard Lawrence, fails to measure up to the kind of military standard of masculinity. So they'll show him failing at all the different obstacles. So these are sort of physical tests that the men have to accomplish in order to sort of prove themselves as soldiers. And it seems as if, to be a good soldier, you have to be both physically strong, physically capable of enduring hardship, but also it's a psychological strength that it seems like Pyle doesn't possess either. So his failure is illustrated, time and again, is in these obstacle courses. And we get a sort of very symbolic scene where he is failing to climb over the ladder. And at the very top of the ladder is Sergeant Hartman, and the other men sort of go over and surpass Pyle at this stage, and he's unable to sort of take himself over the top. But I think the ladder here is a very good kind of metaphor for the hierarchy of the military system. So you see how Hartman is at the very top of that ladder, commanding the men to sort of prove themselves. They're all looking for his approval, and Pyle is failing to meet that approval. He suffers the consequences of failing to meet gender expectations. So there are sort of repercussions for that character because he's unable to sort of meet the gender expectations of masculinity in this social order. So in the military, and he'll be humiliated by the sergeant. There's that scene where he's forced to sort of suck his thumb like a baby. His pants are down by his ankles. So it's really sort of degrading him, turning him like treating him like a baby, like a child, like he's not a man, a full-grown adult, a man. So treating him like he's a child. Um, and in that way, Hartman also kind of symbolically becomes the patriarch, the father figure, and Pyle's like his failed son who can't live up to his expectations. So we kind of get this patriarchal father-son role coming through as well. So Pyle, he's humiliated, he's shamed by the others, he's sort of ostracized and excluded. But this will sort of progress as it sort of becomes more and more apparent that he can't fulfill the role as a Marine. He just is not physically or psychologically capable of that. So we have Pyle failing to measure up and not gaining the sergeant's approval. So that is related to his masculinity and his success as a Marine soldier. So in contrast with Private Pyle, who fails to get Hartman's approval, Private Joker actually earns Hartman's respect in a kind of interesting way. So Joker will challenge Private or Sergeant Hartman. So Sergeant Hartman is talking about, having love and respect for a higher power, and he's talking about the love of the Virgin Mary. And then he asks Private Joker whether he loves the Virgin Mary, and Joker says no, he doesn't. He's, an atheist. He doesn't believe. He doesn't have sort of a religious belief system. And then rather than back down when asked again, Joker sort of stands his ground and understands the situation and, stands up for his beliefs. And as a result, Hartman actually respects this decision and rewards Private Joker with promotion to platoon leader. So Private Joker sort of earns Hartman's approval, earns his respect by showing that he has a sort of strong sense of self, a strength of his will and his belief. So it also sort of speaks to what Hartman and the system wants to see in a soldier. So it's not just about being sort of mindless robots. It's also about sort of having strong convictions, strong sense of, standing by one's beliefs and be willing to sort of risk or put yourself in a sort of dangerous position, not backing down when confronted or intimidated. So in that way, Joker kind of he's rewarded by becoming the platoon leader. So his status on that hierarchy is going up, and Pyle's is down at the bottom. So he's at the bottom rung of this sort of hierarchical system. Joker will actually take Pyle under his wing and start to help him improve some of his skills as a Marine. So he kind of starts from scratch. But you'll see his approach to teaching is much different than Hartman's. Joker is a lot more kind of sensitive, kind. He treats Pyle like he's a human being. He doesn't insult or humiliate him. He'll treat him almost like a little brother. So caring kind of relationship, a different kind of mentor figure, I guess, as opposed to Hartman, who is just very verbally and physically abusive. We've seen Hartman, beat the men, insult them, call them sort of every derogatory name in the book, and really kind of break them down so he can rebuild them as hard, tough killing machines. Joker seems to want to sort of hold on to a little bit of his sensitivity and compassion. at least at this point of the film. So he sort of is teaching Pyle to